Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Tonight's story is not just about a crash. It's about a moment that was meant to entertain strangers online and instead ended a life. This is the case of a TikToker charged after a fatal livestream crash. It was a cold evening in suburban Illinois. The streets were dim, traffic lights blinking through mist, the kind of night where everything feels slow and ordinary. But inside one moving car, something very different was happening. A phone was mounted. A red live icon was glowing on the screen. Comments were scrolling. Strangers were watching in real time. According to investigators, the driver wasn't just driving. She was talking, reacting, performing. Her online name was already familiar to thousands. A TikTok creator known for speaking freely, venting, storytelling, and long live streams where followers felt like friends. That night, she went live again while behind the wheel. Police later said the live stream showed movement, headlights, streetlights flashing past. A casual conversation tone. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that suggested death was seconds away. Then came the intersection. Witnesses reported the traffic signal was red. A pedestrian was crossing, a middle-aged man walking home after work, carrying the quiet exhaustion of an ordinary day. He never looked at the phone. He never saw the live stream. The car did not stop. The impact was violent. Metal, glass, a human body thrown forward. The live stream did not immediately end. According to court documents, the phone kept recording, capturing confusion, shock, and a sudden shift in the driver's voice. Viewers began typing frantic comments. Some wrote "stop." Others wrote "call 911. A few didn't understand what they had just witnessed. By the time emergency responders arrived, the man lay critically injured. He would later die from his wounds. At first, there was silence from the driver's social media. No apology video, no explanation. The live stream vanished. But the internet never forgets. Clips were screen-recorded, timestamps were preserved, and slowly, investigators began connecting dots that the driver may have believed were invisible. What police would later uncover was not just a crash, but a timeline built from digital evidence, phone data, and the very live stream meant to entertain. And as the investigation deepened, one disturbing question kept surfacing. Was this tragedy an accident, or the predictable result of attention taken too far? In the next part, we'll look at who this TikToker really was, how her online persona blurred into real life, and why prosecutors say the livestream itself became a weapon. Before the crash, she was not known as a criminal. Online, she was known as a voice. Her TikTok persona was built on long, unfiltered livestreams, the kind where followers felt like they were sitting in the passenger seat, listening to a friend talk about life, stress, anger, and everyday frustrations. She spoke fast. She spoke emotionally. And most importantly, she spoke constantly. According to investigators, this habit didn't stop when she drove. Friends would later say she hated silence. Former followers said her live streams felt real, raw, and addictive. But what made her popular also created a dangerous illusion that she could multitask reality and performance at the same time. On the night of the crash, police say she had been live for several minutes. She was responding to comments, laughing at some, arguing with others. Her eyes, investigators allege, were not always on the road. Phone data would later show movement consistent, with a mounted device facing the driver. Not hidden, not discreet, openly active. This wasn't a quick glance at a notification. This was sustained engagement. And that matters, because under Illinois law, using a communication device in a way that distracts a driver, especially when it results in death, changes everything. What might have once been labeled a tragic accident now entered a darker legal category. Meanwhile, the victim's identity began to surface. He was a 59-year-old man, a worker, a routine commuter, someone whose life followed predictable patterns: leave work, walk home, cross the same intersection he had crossed hundreds of times before. No live stream, no audience, no warnings. When his family was notified, they weren't shown a blurry security clip or a single police photo. They were told something far worse existed. A video, recorded live, watched by strangers. As detectives reviewed the footage frame by frame, they noticed something unsettling. There was no sudden swerve, no visible attempt to brake before impact, just forward motion and silence right before chaos. In the next part, and this is where the case turns chilling, we'll break down what the live stream allegedly captured in the seconds after impact, and why prosecutors say those moments changed the entire direction of the case. Seconds after the impact, the tone of the live stream changed. What had been casual conversation instantly fractured into confusion. Viewers later told police they heard a sharp sound, metal meeting flesh, followed by a sudden jolt in the camera's angle. Then, according to witness statements, there was a pause. Not a scream, not immediate panic. A pause. Investigators say the driver's voice sounded stunned, almost detached, as if her mind was trying to understand what her eyes had just seen. Comments began flooding the screen faster than she could read them. Did you hit someone? Stop the car. Oh my God. For several seconds, the vehicle continued moving. That detail would later become crucial. Prosecutors allege that instead of pulling over immediately, the car traveled further down the road before stopping. Phone GPS data, combined with traffic camera footage, helped reconstruct those moments with disturbing precision. When the live stream finally ended, emergency services had not yet been called. Instead, investigators say the first calls came from witnesses at the intersection, people who saw a body on the road and rushed forward in shock. By the time police arrived, the driver was present. She appeared shaken. She told officers she didn't see him. That phrase would echo throughout the investigation. I didn't see him. But the evidence told a more complicated story. Traffic signals were functioning properly. Streetlights were on. The pedestrian was in a marked crosswalk. And then there was the phone. Detectives obtained a warrant for the device used during the live stream. Inside, they found the app still logged in. The stream history, the timestamps, the comments, a digital trail that couldn't forget, even if its owner wanted it to. As investigators synced the live stream footage with the exact second of impact, a disturbing overlap emerged. The moment her attention shifted to the screen lined up precisely with the moment the light turned red. To prosecutors, this wasn't distraction. It was engagement. Active, intentional, and deadly. In the next part, we'll examine how social media fame began working against her, as followers, once supportive, turned into witnesses, and in some cases, evidence providers. At first, her followers defended her. In comment sections and reposted clips, people said it was just an accident. They blamed poor lighting. They blamed bad timing. Some even blamed the pedestrian. But that defense didn't last long, because more screen recordings began to surface. Different angles, different moments from the same live stream. Small details that felt harmless at first, now frozen in time. One clip showed her glancing down, reacting to a comment, her tone sharp, her focus split. Another showed the car approaching the intersection just seconds before the impact. And then there was the audio. Investigators say the sound of the crash was unmistakable. Not a pothole, not debris, a heavy, sudden force. As these clips spread, something shifted. Followers stopped seeing a creator. They started seeing a timeline. People who had once chatted with her live now realized they were present at the moment someone died. Not physically, but digitally. Some viewers contacted police on their own. They turned over screen recordings. They gave statements. They described exactly what they saw and when they saw it. In this case, the audience didn't just watch. They testified. Prosecutors later described the live stream as a rolling crime scene, recorded voluntarily by the suspect herself. Every second she stayed live added another layer of evidence. Meanwhile, the victim's family was learning pieces of the story from the news, not from police. They heard the word TikTok attached to his death before they ever saw a full report. For them, grief mixed with something darker, the idea that their loved one's final moments were consumed as content. As public pressure grew, the driver's social media accounts went quiet. Videos were deleted. Comments were limited. But deletion doesn't erase data. Search warrants were expanded. Cloud backups were examined. And prosecutors began preparing charges that went beyond careless driving. This wasn't just about running a red light anymore. It was about choosing to perform while operating a deadly machine. In the next part, we'll break down the exact charges filed and why this case could change how live streaming behind the wheel is treated under you. Lord. When the charges were finally announced, they were heavier than many expected. Prosecutors did not describe the crash as a simple mistake. They described it as a chain of decisions. According to court records, the TikToker was charged with reckless homicide, a felony that alleges conscious disregard for safety. In addition, she faced charges tied specifically to the use of a communication device while driving, elevated because the distraction resulted in a death. That distinction matters because it meant the live stream itself wasn't just background noise. It was central to the case. Investigators argued that going live, reading comments, and responding in real time required continuous attention. Attention that should have been on the road. The phone wasn't passive, it was interactive. In court filings, prosecutors pointed to the duration of the live stream, the speed of the vehicle, the lack of braking before impact. They said this wasn't a sudden lapse, it was sustained risk. The defense pushed back immediately. Her attorneys claimed she never intended harm, that she was emotional after the crash. That shock affected her reactions. They emphasized that distraction alone should not equal criminal intent. But prosecutors weren't arguing intent to kill. They were arguing something colder, that she knew the risks, that she ignored them, and that someone else paid the price. As the case moved forward, the judge set bond conditions. She was released pending trial, with restrictions, including limits on driving and social media use. That detail sparked outrage online. Many asked how someone accused of killing a man while live streaming could walk free. But legally, the case was only beginning. Behind the scenes, investigators continued digging, not just into the crash, but into her history. And what they found raised a troubling pattern. In the next part, we'll explore her past live stream behavior, and why prosecutors say this crash wasn't an isolated moment of distraction, but part of something much larger. As investigators looked deeper, they didn't just focus on one night. They went backwards. Weeks of archived live streams were reviewed, hours of footage, thousands of comments, and a pattern began to emerge. According to prosecutors, this wasn't the first time she went live while driving. In earlier streams, viewers could hear turn signals clicking, engines accelerating, horns in the background. Sometimes she even acknowledged she was on the road. "Y'all know I'm driving," she once said casually in a previous stream, according to transcripts obtained by police. To investigators, this mattered. It showed familiarity, comfort, a belief that nothing would go wrong. More troubling were moments where viewers warned her. "Watch the road, eyes up, please don't read comments while driving." She laughed them off. In one archived clip, she reportedly said she had done this 100 times. That sentence would later appear in court filings, not as a joke, but as evidence. Prosecutors argued it proved awareness of risk, not ignorance. Meanwhile, experts were consulted. Traffic safety analysts explained how live streaming creates cognitive overload, not just visual distraction, but emotional and mental engagement. Unlike texting, live streaming demands reaction, performance, and presence. You're not just looking at a screen, you're feeding it. And that difference, prosecutors said, turned a dangerous habit into a lethal one. The defense countered that many drivers talk on hands-free calls. That distraction exists everywhere. That singling out live streaming was unfair. But prosecutors weren't comparing her to an average driver. They were comparing her to the evidence, the timestamps, the audio, the movement of the vehicle. And then came a detail that shocked even seasoned investigators. In the seconds before the crash, her tone changed, as if reacting emotionally to a comment. That emotional spike, experts testified, can narrow focus and delay reaction time. In other words, a comment may have taken her eyes off the road long enough to end a life. In the next part, we'll turn to the victim, who he was, how his family learned the truth, and why they say this case is about far more than social media. For the victim's family, the crash wasn't a headline. It was a knock on the door. He was a man of routine. Work, walk home, dinner, sleep, repeat. The night he died, nothing about his day suggested it would be his last. According to relatives, he had spoken earlier about ordinary things, errands, bills, plans for the weekend. No arguments, no danger, just life moving forward. And then it stopped. Police informed the family that he had been struck in a crosswalk. That part was painful but understandable. What came next was harder. They were told the driver had been live streaming. At first, they didn't understand what that meant. Then someone explained. His final moments weren't just witnessed by first responders or investigators. They were seen by strangers, on their phones in real time. The family refused to watch the footage. They didn't need to. They knew enough. As the case became public, they asked for one thing: accountability. Not internet outrage, not viral clips. Justice. They attended court hearings quietly. No interviews, no statements crafted for sympathy, just presence. Prosecutors said the family's restraint stood in sharp contrast to the chaos online, where opinions formed faster than facts, and arguments raged in comment sections far removed from the reality of loss. Behind the scenes, civil attorneys began preparing a wrongful death lawsuit. They reviewed insurance policies, digital behavior, earnings from live streams, because another uncomfortable question had surfaced. Was attention monetized that night? If so, who benefits when tragedy becomes content? While those questions played out legally, the criminal case continued to build. And then a new development pushed this story beyond one courtroom, into a national conversation. In the next part, we'll look at how this case ignited debates across the U.S. about distracted driving, live streaming laws, and whether current regulations are dangerously outdated. As news of the charges spread, the case stopped being local. It began appearing on national broadcasts, podcasts, and late-night discussions about technology and responsibility. Lawmakers, safety experts, and digital ethicists all asked the same question in different ways. Have the laws kept up with the way we live online? In many states, texting while driving is illegal. Some restrict phone use entirely. But live streaming exists in a gray area, part communication, part performance, part distraction. This case exposed that gap. Prosecutors argued that live streaming is more dangerous than texting because it demands continuous interaction. You're not sending one message, you're maintaining an audience, and that audience expects engagement. Experts testified that this expectation creates pressure to look, to respond, to stay live, even when it's unsafe. Turning off the stream can feel like losing control, relevance, or income. In other words, the app doesn't force you to stay live, but it rewards you if you do. That idea unsettled many people. Traffic safety organizations began using the case as a warning example. Advocacy groups called for clearer laws banning live streaming while driving. Some families of distracted driving victims came forward with similar stories: crashes caused by phones, cameras, and the need to be seen. Meanwhile, TikTok released a brief statement reminding users that dangerous behavior is prohibited on the platform. But critics pointed out the obvious: the live stream had already happened. The damage was already done. Inside the courtroom, the defense argued that punishing one creator wouldn't solve a systemic problem. They said responsibility also lies with platforms that encourage constant engagement. Prosecutors didn't disagree, but they made one thing clear. This case wasn't about TikTok. It was about choice. The choice to go live, the choice to keep reading comments, the choice to drive through an intersection without full attention, and the irreversible result of those choices. In the next part, we'll step inside the courtroom itself, the key moments, the emotional testimony, and the detail that made the room go silent. The courtroom was quiet when the prosecution played the audio. They didn't show video. They didn't need to. Just sound. The low hum of the engine. Her voice mid-sentence. The sudden, violent interruption. Several people in the room looked away. The judge listened without expression. Prosecutors walked the court through the timeline second by second, syncing the live stream audio with traffic camera data and phone movement records. It was precise, almost clinical. They pointed out the absence of braking, the steady speed, the moment her voice reacted, not to the road but to a comment. That overlap was devastating. When it was the defense's turn, they emphasized shock. They described trauma responses. They argued that panic can delay reaction, distort memory, and affect behavior after a crash. They asked the court not to confuse distraction with intent. But prosecutors weren't asking the jury to read her mind. They were asking them to look at her actions. And then came a witness few expected. A former follower. Someone who had watched her live streams regularly. Someone who had defended her at first. On the stand, the witness described realizing days later that they had been present virtually when a man was killed. That realization, they said, made them sick. "I thought I was just watching someone talk," the witness testified. "I didn't know I was watching a crime happen." That sentence lingered. It captured something the legal language couldn't: the eerie normality of the moment before everything broke. As the hearing ended, the judge set further dates. Motions, evidence review, a trial timeline. Outside the courtroom, cameras waited. But she didn't speak. She kept her head down and walked past. In the next part, we'll examine what this case could mean for future prosecutions, and why legal experts say it may set a precedent that reaches far beyond one crash. Legal analysts began calling it a precedent case, not because someone caused a fatal crash. That, sadly, happens too often, but because of how the crash was documented. Never before had prosecutors walked into court with a death recorded live, voluntarily, by the accused herself. No dashcam, no bodycams, no surveillance alone. A live stream. Experts said this changed everything. Usually, investigators reconstruct events after the fact, through debris, witness memory, imperfect angles. Here, the timeline spoke for itself. The phone didn't forget. The app didn't blink. And that raised a chilling possibility. If this case succeeds, live streaming while driving could be treated not just as distraction, but as recklessness by design. Some defense attorneys warned this could open the door to aggressive prosecutions. Others said it was overdue. One legal scholar put it bluntly: when you choose to perform for an audience while driving, you accept a risk that the law can no longer ignore. Behind the scenes, prosecutors reportedly refused plea discussions early on. They believed the evidence was strong, too strong to compromise. Meanwhile, the accused remained free on bond, living under strict conditions, knowing that every move, every post, every word could be scrutinized. Friends said she stopped going live entirely. That silence, once unimaginable, became her reality. But silence doesn't bring relief. According to court filings, she began experiencing anxiety and isolation, a sharp contrast to the attention-driven life she once lived. The audience was gone. What remained was consequence. In the next part, we'll look at the psychological side of this case, how internet validation can distort judgment, and why experts say this wasn't just negligence, but addiction. Psychologists called to consult on the case used a word that made many uncomfortable: addiction, not to substances, but to attention. They explained how live streaming triggers the brain's reward system. Each comment, each reaction, each viewer count increase releases a small surge of validation. Over time, that validation becomes necessary. According to experts, some creators begin to feel invisible when they are not live. Silence feels like loss. Stopping the stream feels like disappearing. And when that mindset follows someone into a car, the danger multiplies. Because driving requires something live streaming cannot tolerate: absence. Moments where nothing is said. Moments where no one is acknowledged. Moments where attention must be fully elsewhere. Experts testified that in high-emotion live streams, reaction time can slow dramatically. Your brain prioritizes social engagement over environmental awareness. In this case, prosecutors argued the live stream wasn't background noise. It was the primary focus. The defense objected to the term addiction, calling it speculative and unfair. They argued that millions of people use social media daily without causing harm. But prosecutors weren't talking about millions. They were talking about one person, one night, one decision repeated until it ended a life. As closing arguments for pretrial motions approached, one question remained unresolved: could the accused have stopped the stream? Of course. Was she pressured to stay live? No. But did the desire to remain visible override common sense? That's what the jury would have to decide. In the next part, we'll examine the final evidence prosecutors plan to introduce, the detail they believe will eliminate all reasonable doubt. The final piece of evidence wasn't dramatic. No shocking video, no emotional witness, just data. Prosecutors revealed phone analytics showing engagement spike seconds before the crash. New viewers joining. Comments increasing. The kind of surge creators chase. According to experts, that spike coincided with increased interaction from the driver. Faster speech, sharper tone, more reaction. At the exact same moment, the vehicle approached the intersection. Investigators overlaid 3 timelines: the live stream engagement, the traffic signal cycle, the car's speed and movement. They lined up perfectly. When the light turned red, the live stream activity peaked. That overlap, prosecutors said, wasn't coincidence. It was cause. The defense argued correlation doesn't equal guilt. That data can't measure human intent. But prosecutors weren't measuring intent. They were measuring attention. And attention, they said, was elsewhere. As the hearing closed, the judge allowed all digital evidence to move forward to trial. No exclusions, no reductions. For the prosecution, it was a quiet victory. For the defense, it was a warning. Because once a jury sees those timelines together, the case stops being abstract. It becomes unavoidable. In the next part, we'll look at how the accused's silence, no public apology, no statement, has shaped public perception, and whether that silence helps or hurts her case. Since the night of the crash, she has said almost nothing publicly. No apology video, no tearful explanation, no statement to followers. In the world of social media, that silence felt loud. Supporters argued her lawyers advised her to stay quiet, a smart legal move. Critics saw something else: avoidance. Prosecutors never commented on her silence, but analysts noted its impact. Without a narrative from her side, the evidence spoke alone, and the evidence was unforgiving. Former followers described feeling betrayed. They had trusted her voice, invited it into their lives. Now that voice was tied to death. Some unfollowed quietly. Others left angry messages before accounts went dark. The platform moved on. The family did not. As trial preparation continued, victim impact statements were submitted, sealed until sentencing, but heavy enough to influence bail discussions. Inside those statements were details no live stream could capture: the empty chair at dinner, the unanswered phone calls, the finality of never coming home. Legal experts say juries don't just decide facts. They weigh silence, presence, remorse. Whether her quiet helps or hurts will depend on one thing: does the jury see caution or indifference? In the next part, we reach the final stretch: the trial's expected outcome, the possible sentences, and why this case may be remembered long after the verdict. As the case moves closer to trial, the stakes could not be higher. If convicted, prosecutors say she could face years in prison, not just for reckless homicide, but for setting an example that the law can no longer afford to ignore. Sentencing guidelines allow for long-term incarceration, mandatory driving bans, and permanent felony records that would end any future as a public creator. Legal experts say the jury's decision will likely hinge on one core idea: responsibility. Not fame, not technology, not pressure. Responsibility. Did she choose to prioritize a live stream over human life? The defense will argue tragedy, not crime. That no one wakes up planning to kill a stranger. That punishment won't bring the victim back. The prosecution will respond with something colder: no one planned it. But it was preventable, and preventable deaths are exactly why reckless homicide laws exist. Outside the courtroom, lawmakers are already watching. Some states have quietly begun drafting language that would explicitly ban live streaming while driving. This case, they say, showed them what happens when the law lags behind behavior. Families of other victims have also been paying attention. People who lost loved ones to distracted drivers who never faced serious consequences. For them, this trial represents something rare: a line being drawn. In the next and final part, we'll close this story, not with a verdict, but with the question this case leaves behind, and why it should make every viewer think twice before going live. This case doesn't end with flashing lights or a dramatic confession. It ends with a choice that was made in seconds, but whose consequences will last forever. A man who left work expecting to go home never did. A family learned that ordinary routines can be shattered without warning. And a creator who once thrived on being seen now faces a future defined by scrutiny, instead of applause. The live stream is gone. The comments have stopped. The audience moved on. But the evidence remains. This story isn't just about one TikToker. It's about how easily attention can replace awareness, and how technology can quietly turn risk into routine. Somewhere tonight, another phone will be mounted on a dashboard. Another Red's live button will glow, and someone will believe they can handle both worlds at once. This case stands as a reminder that roads don't forgive distraction, and the internet never forgets. If this story made you pause, if it made you think differently about the choices we make every day, then let us know your thoughts in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story so more people hear it. Thank you for listening.